They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
Alright guys, I'm going to be completely honest. I have no idea why I've not done this video so far on this channel. You know, this is something that we did every single week on the Fantasy Football channel throughout the course of the season. So I promise you, I know I did not get to a good amount of teams that were submitted, but it's because this is our first video, so we had so much demand for people to look at their teams. So guys, please just be on the lookout. What I'm going to do from now on is I will send out a tweet saying, hey, send me your fantasy basketball lineups. That way I can go through, I can give you some advice, I can tell you my thoughts on some certain players that you have on your roster. So if you're not already, just make sure that you're going to be following me on Instagram, that you're going to be following me on Twitter. That way, for future reference, y'all are able to submit your teams because I'm going to be doing this a lot more often. But I believe that's it. Make sure y'all are going down there, dropping a like on the video. Make sure y'all are subscribing to the channel. It helps us out so much, and we continue to be, I believe, the fastest growing fantasy basketball channel on YouTube. I've done some research and can't find any that are growing faster than we are on a percentage subscriber basis. Y'all have been absolutely killing the videos as of late, so I can't wait to dive into this one. And yeah, let's get into it, and I'm going to just be putting the team up on the screen next to me if you have not had the chance to see one of these videos on our Fantasy Football channel. So hopefully y'all like this format. If there's anything I can do to improve it going forward, as always, let me know in the comment section below. This is actually where I got the idea of making this video. But anyway, let's dive into it. And our first team that we are going to pull up is going to have Chris Paul down at the point guard spot. If we go through, they have Fred VanVleet, they have Keldon Johnson, they have Brandon Ingram, Rudy Gobert, John Wall, Miles Turner, Darius Garland, Kyrie Irving, Jimmy Butler, Kobe White, Andrew Wiggins, Jaren Jackson Jr., Enes Kanter, Kevin Love, and DeAndre Hunter. And here, there are a couple players that I want to kind of highlight on this roster. And really, the first one is going to be Jaren Jackson Jr., just as a player that we have not talked about yet on this channel. Obviously, he is yet to play this season so far, but I am extremely excited. He should be coming back very soon. And with Jaren Jackson Jr., he is still only 21 years old. Absolutely absurd for a player that's going into his third NBA season. And he's not an old 21. I mean, he's not close to turning 22 at this point. So still, if you look at his size being 6'11", if you look at how fast he can get up and down the court, combined with the fact that he is still extremely young, I mean, this is a player with so much upside. And last season, he was able to average 29 minutes a game. He was able to put up 2.5 threes a game. I'm sorry, he put up probably closer to 6 3-point shots a game, but 2.5 fell a game. And that's the number one thing that we know about with Jaren Jackson Jr. While he's a big that may not necessarily be giving you a ton of rebounding production, we know that he is going to be giving you blocks, he's going to be giving you 3-point shots, and just naturally as he kind of continues to grow as a man. I mean, he's 21 years old, guys. Just think about how much smaller of a human being you were when you were 21. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is definitely going to fill out. I think he's definitely going to give you more rebounding production going forward as he continues to develop throughout his NBA career. So he's going to be a player that makes an impact once he comes back for this roster. And honestly, that's why I want to go out there and I want to sell high on Enes Kanter. And with Kanter, we know Nurkic is going to be coming back eventually. And once that happens, Kanter is going to be a player that is kind of plummeting to the point where we're not necessarily going to be able to play him over a Jaren Jackson Jr. And if that's the case, I think that we just get out ahead of it. I mean, while Kanter still has the value, while he's still going to be producing for the next few weeks, I think you capitalize on it. Obviously, it's not necessarily going to be a spot where you can sell Kanter straight up for a significant piece coming back your direction, because everybody knows that he is going to be losing his value very soon. But all you have to do is you have to be a little bit creative with it, where maybe you can take Kanter and you can package him together with another player like maybe Darius Garland, someone who looks like he is coming on strong in his own right, or maybe package him together with a player that does not necessarily have the upside that you would want to see with a Keldon Johnson, and try to get an upgrade in your starting lineup at the forward position, because I think that's the one spot that this roster could use a little bit of help. I mean, you have a ridiculous amount of guards here producing. So I think if we could upgrade the small forward, that would make a ton of sense if we can do so by packaging together Enes Kanter and a player like Keldon Johnson. All right, now let me pull up our next roster. And I'm not going to be reading down the players like I did the last one. I mean, y'all can see it on the screen. I need to remember that. And anyway, let's pick a couple players out of this list that I think that we need to be focusing in on. And the story on this team, in my opinion, is the fact that you are getting some players off the IR very soon. I mean, you are going to be getting Karl Anthony Towns back. Most likely, by the time this video comes out, Karl Anthony Towns will be playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves yet again. And to nobody's surprise, we all know that he's going to be an impact player, top 3 player in fantasy, with how not only talented he is, but with how many minutes he sees in that rotation and the kind of role that he plays for that team. And then also, you're going to be getting Nurkic back later on this season. So if we are going through, I know this is a very boring thing to do because we did it with the same team previously. But I think this is a great strategy piece that we can use in our fantasy basketball leagues. And that's independent of what your team is. If you know that you have an impact player coming back from injury, you can go through and you can look at some guys in your roster that may not necessarily have the long-term upside, and you can flip them for immediate profit now that you have another option to put in there. So maybe this is another team that we decide to go out there and package Kanter together with another player. If we were looking at Malcolm Brogdon, honestly, even with Karis LeVert coming back in 4 to 5 weeks, I still want to be holding on to Malcolm Brogdon just because he has truly been special throughout the first half of the NBA season. But if we look across the board, I mean, Pascal Siakam, someone that I would be interested in seeing what kind of value you can get based on his early season struggles. But at the same time, I mean, it's going to be very league dependent on what kind of price you can ask for in return. Jamal Murray, I really want to keep him on our roster. While yes, he was a player that we were avoiding in fantasy drafts this offseason, I mean, he has at least stepped it up with the assist as well as the rebounds, where he's not necessarily killing you in any given category. And then if we go to the rest of your roster, I think possibly what we can look to do is we can look to take DeMar DeRozan, a player that I think is playing a little bit over his head currently. We know that DeRozan is a guy that is based on athleticism with how he plays his game, and I don't necessarily like to have those players on my roster if they are on the downward curve of their NBA careers. So possibly what we look to do is we look to take DeMar DeRozan and we look to take Enes Kanter, and we try to get an upgrade, whether that's at the small forward, whether that's at the big man position. Really does not matter, but I think that these first teams, we're going to have very similar approaches, both of them. And here, I'll say, with a Michael Porter Jr., I know a lot of people are going to want to hear our take on him just because he's probably the most polarizing player in the entire NBA currently. I think that this is a guy that the ceiling is just so high that you are going to have to hold on to. I mean, we've seen moments of greatness from Michael Porter Jr. While, yes, he does not necessarily have the role in the rotation that you'd want to see for him to be a fantasy superstar, at the same time, we know that this is a player that has the physical traits where he can be I don't want to say a Kevin Durant type player. He looks like Kevin Durant. I mean, he looks like that 7-foot shooting guard, and that's what you would love to see from Michael Porter Jr. All right, so now let's pull up our next team. And this one is going to have Trae Young at the point guard. And I'll say this with Trae Young. I know earlier this season, I was telling you to buy the dip. I was telling you to buy low on him. Honestly, I expected more of those threes to be going in by now, but I am still going to be standing strong on here. And I'll say the number one thing I want to be looking at is I want to be looking at Jarrett Allen here. We know that Kevin Love is coming back to this Cleveland Cavaliers team, and we know that Andre Drummond has been still seeing a significant amount of minutes in that rotation for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he's looked very good while doing so. But with Jarrett Allen, I mean, he has all the talent in the world. The blocks are going to be there. He's an elite rebounder. So what we need to see is we need to see some movement from the Cleveland Cavaliers with the big man position, because they just have so many 4s and 5s right now on that roster, taking minutes, taking touches, grabbing those boards, where if we see one of those veterans possibly get moved, I mean, it's going to be nearly impossible for Kevin Love to get moved. I know a lot of people want to always put Kevin Love on the trade block, but we have to understand that in the NBA, with Kevin Love's contract, there are really going to be no contenders that can take that contract on. and would be willing to do so for a marginal upgrade in Kevin Love at this point in his NBA career. So I think what we need to see is we need to see Andre Drummond traded to really unlock Jarrett Allen's value. And considering that the Cleveland Cavaliers got Andre Drummond for pretty much nothing, their investment into him, anything that they would sell would be an instant profit. So here I'll say Jarrett Allen, someone that I am looking at, probably going to have to slide to your bench soon. And our number one thing I want to say on this roster at the same time is we need to be looking to sell Zion Williamson. And with Zion, y'all know this is a player that I was trying to get y'all to avoid in the second and third round of fantasy basketball drafts this past offseason. And that's because we know that Zion's going to give you the points. He's going to give you a nice field goal percentage. But outside of that, I mean, he is going to completely tank you in the free throw category. And we know that he's not going to give you any assist. For a big man, he's only going to be giving you half a block a game. And he's giving you less than 8 rebounds a game at the same time. So with Zion, while he's one of the most exciting young players in the NBA, and while he can continue to develop, I think his name brand, just the fact that he is Zion Williamson and the player that we saw at Duke, makes me want to see what we can get for him on the trade market. So yeah, that's going to be my number one thing. And lastly, I'll say we need to be having our eye out for Lonzo Ball. I mean, just like I talked about Andre Drummond possibly getting traded off the Cavaliers team, with Lonzo, I would like to see Lonzo possibly be moved just because the fit with the Pelicans right now looks disgusting. I mean, he looked like he was taking that step forward last season, but that was under a different coaching scheme. We know that they were running a lot more in transition, and now that they're playing more half court, I mean, Zion just really does not fit that. All right, so now let's get our next team pulled up here. And this team has a couple guys that we've been talking about as of late. I mean, Malcolm Brogdon, Zach LaVine. We know that those are two extremely exciting players, and considering where you most likely took them in your fantasy drafts this offseason, I mean, this team should be a juggernaut. I will say we got the information that this league is a points league, not a category league, so that is definitely going to make Giannis a lot more exciting, where we know that Giannis is close to 30 points a game, over 11 rebounds a game, 6 assists, and he has the defensive statistics at the same time. So that's exciting. If it was a category league, I'd be a little bit worried about having both Zach LaVine and Giannis on the same roster, given the fact that one of the reasons Zach LaVine is so valuable is his free throw percentage, and we know Giannis completely tanks you in that category. But because this is a point league, we are completely fine there. And I will say, because this is a point league, a player that I actually talked about on the video yesterday that I really liked, I think we need to be selling, because he is a much better player in a category league than he is in a traditional point league. And this is going to be Gordon Hayward. And here with Gordon Hayward, I mean, he just plays so much off ball that it makes sense when you are having to take into consideration strongly turnovers and percentages to have him ranked highly in those category formats. But if this is a points league, I would rather try to take a Gordon Hayward, and I'd rather try to package him together with another player on your bench, maybe a DeLon Wright that you just picked up off the waiver wire. And if you can get any marginal upgrade where we're going to get a player with a little bit more usage, that would make sense for me. All right, we're running short on time here, so let's get to this last team very quickly. I am sorry if I was unable to get to your roster. I had a ton of DMs, and yeah, I'm going to be doing this very often. So please, guys, if you have not already, go DM me your rosters. I know you can't post them in the YouTube comments. If you wanted to write it out, I guess you could, but honestly, it would look kind of crappy on the screen, so don't do that. Anyway, this last team has Kyrie Irving and James Harden both stacked on it. I'm sure that you took these players individually in your fantasy basketball draft, not expecting that stack to necessarily happen. And here, because the defense has been so bad for the Brooklyn Nets, honestly, having both Kyrie and James Harden has kind of been a blessing based on the fact that they are having to drop 130 points a game if the Brooklyn Nets want to rack up those wins. And if we go through the rest of your roster, I'll say the number one thing that I'm going to be looking to do here is going to be something that most people don't agree with me on, and that's going to be selling Paul George. And the reason we're going to be selling Paul George is simply the three-point percentage is not sustainable. He is going to regress where he is not going to be knocking down nearly half of his three-point shots, especially at the volume that Paul George decides to take them at. I mean, right now, he looks like the best shooter in the NBA. And while we know that he can go through those extremely hot stretches where he is an elite option at the position, He's most likely not going to maintain that. And I will say we are going to be selling Colin Sexton with Garland coming back into this rotation, just because I think the usage should go down as well as the overall point production. All right, I hope that helped y'all with your rosters. I hope I was able to say something that you could carry over to your own fantasy basketball league. If not, please go down to the comments. Let me know any questions that you have. And yeah, go send me your teams on Instagram and Twitter. And drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.